What you are about to hear will blow your mind and give you six-pack abs without even exercising.
Pull up a bar stool and relax.
Hey, who wants to have some fun?
You've made it to Happy Hour with John Gaskins.
Oh, no. Not again.
Get ready for entertaining local and regional sports talk that will change your life. Or not.
And by the way, when you're telling these little stories, here's a good idea. Have a point. It makes it so much more interesting for the listener.
Here's your host, John Gaskins.
Here's Johnny. Hello! Ah!
I'm back, baby! I'm back!
Hey, happy hour on a Monday. We are at Gibbs Sports Bar on the east side of Sioux Falls, and we are 1 week from game week to 2026 for the Jackrabbits and the Coyotes. And our special guest today is one of the all-time Yotes in school history, Scott Jones, quarterback on the 1985 national semifinal team and the team that made it to the national championship game in '86, both ending in losses to the Bison. He is one of the biggest boosters USD has. Literally gave the biggest private family gift to the athletic department in history until Danny Sanford had to top him with a $20 million gift last year. So Scott will join us to talk about his decorated past, part of history with Bob Burns and O'Gorman in the early 80s, and then his time at USD, and where he sees all of this headed, included perhaps to the FBS as a major investor in the program. We're going to talk to some Yotes later this week, including the coordinators, couple players. Last week was SDSU Media Day, and we talked to several Jackrabbits, both coordinators, Dan Jackson and John Stiegelmeier. And we got a lot of great material to get you ready for football, some insights, some opinions, but the strongest thing, or the strongest reaction to anything we did last week in Brookings, came not from Dan Jackson or John Stiegelmeier, either coordinator, Chase Mason, or even Carter Sitzman, the it kid on the defense. That's coined by me, the Wayne State transfer who's going to wreak havoc. It came from a former walk-on who's returning at defensive end, and this got more traction than anything. This is from defensive end, Dawson Ripperda.
Went to Northern Illinois on a full scholarship, played a year there. Spring season came around, and I decided I didn't want to be there anymore. And so I went to the portal. Jimmy Rogers said, "Hey, there's a walk-on opportunity here, and if you bust your butt and you go work hard and you prove yourself, then you can earn yourself a scholarship." So I took that shot at myself. My parents thought I was crazy. My family thought I was crazy, and I told them, "Hey, I'm coming closer to home, and I'm taking a shot at myself." And the preparation in that was hard. But it was enjoyable at the same time, and it paid off great.
What got you to the finish line of the scholarship, in your own mind?
I would just say blocking out everything outside of, in my mind, honestly. There's a lot of people telling me I shouldn't have done it. A lot of people telling me that you're crazy for walking away from a full ride opportunity over at your school. And just being able to block out the outside noise and just know who truly I am as a player and as a competitor.
That's talking about being a walk-on, the chip on the shoulder. This is his last go at it at SDSU, and that's a kid who has gone through a lot in his college football career. You could hear the quiet humility, kid from Northwest Iowa, small town, West Lyon High School, but you can feel the urgency and the emotion in his voice just to get to the point that he is. And he is one of the 11 out of 22 current starters that Dan Jackson has tabbed for a week from Saturday against Stetson. That was a walk-on. That's half of SDSU's football team. Picked to win the Mo Valley, ranked number 3 in the stats preseason poll nationally. Half the team are guys who are walk-ons who earned scholarships. When you try to compose of all the ingredients that will make a national championship team, and you think back to SDSU in 2022 and 2023 when they did win the national title, you got to have a load of talent. You got to have a lot of experience, and then you got to have great coaching and that edge. That's not all of it, but those are the basics, right? And we know what kind of talent the Jacks had at key positions, especially in the trenches where it all starts. A lot of returning guys, some sixth-year starters, All-Americans with more experience than anybody literally in the history of SDSU football, like Mason McCormick and Garrett Greenfield, on that offensive line. And there's not quite as much talent and not quite as much experience on this SDSU squad as those teams, but there's plenty of both. And then you add in the X factor of 11 players who had to work their asses off just to get a scholarship. And now they've got some experience winning a bunch of games on the field, plus the chip on the shoulder of the way things went pear-shaped and sideways late in that regular season slate in 2025. It's a lot of ingredients, plus more talent and more depth this year for national championship contention. And making up for the fact that there isn't as much talent or experience on this squad as those two national title teams is the fact that this one doesn't have to get past North Dakota State in the regular season nor in the playoffs. It's a topic we'll be broaching again before the season kicks off and probably all fall long. But if you want a recipe and you want that edge, 11 walk-ons cannot hurt you. Those guys have been through a lot just to get to where they are right now. And you saw some of the highlights in the Ripperda clip of how he can rip it up and go after quarterbacks and make life miserable for some MVFC offenses this year. And he's certainly not the only one. I would also throw in a guy we talked to, Reese Kirshenman. There's a guy that went through a painful injury last year, just 2 games in, a traumatic experience for him. Just those two guys on the defensive line with that personal history, plus their talent, plus their experience. Could be a special season. SDSU also had in that 2022 and 2023 season, as we mentioned, immense experience on the offensive line. This year, they returned 5 guys who started on the offensive line last year. Maybe not every game, but 5 guys who started at least one game, and 3 of them started pretty much every game, were full-time starters. So that's something that USD has in its bullet chamber. With the Coyotes, it's the exact opposite. They have only 1 returning starter out of 5, Brock Wolf, the Kansas State transfer. And so that would lead one to believe, this is part of the reason many people think the Yotes will struggle or the Yotes are a big question mark in 2026. And by struggle, I mean to maybe reach the quarterfinals at least for a 4th straight season or to contend for an MVFC title. They're slotted down there at number 12 in the national rankings. They're picked 5th in the MVFC. And not having a returning starting quarterback and certainly having only 1 returning offensive lineman, those are reasons why they're rated this low. And I use that term relatively. And yet, here's Matt Vitztham back in July at MVFC Media Days with me. And this was an open-ended question. What things do you expect to pop for USD this year that maybe fans and media, people outside the walls, aren't really talking about?
But I think our offensive line is going to be much improved. You know, we were pieced together pretty poorly there last year. We made it work. And I think our defensive line, I think watching those two go at it in spring practice was huge.
The offensive line, of which hardly anybody has significantly played for USD. And yet, he thinks they're going to rip it up. And here are the reasons to believe that. Because although a lot of these guys don't have significant starting experience at USD, some of them have played plenty of offensive line for the Coyotes and some of them in other places. And I've buried everything. I've buried the lead. Size, 6'7", 310, 6'6", 315, 6'4", 300, 6'5", 305. They have an offensive lineman at USD this year who played 15 games for them last year, Brendan Crispy, 6'9", 320. So significant height and girth up front, and plus the experience. Caden Ellingson didn't play last year because he was hurt, but he's played plenty in his career. Zach Utley played 17 games for UTEP the last couple seasons. Nick Herzog was at Northwestern in the Big Ten for a few games last year. Grant Chapman and Brandon Crispy, 15 games. They played in all 15 games for USD last year. There's a transfer from Portland State. There's Lucas Feldkamp, who was a behemoth for Brandon Valley's teams the last two, within the last few years. You add all that up, and maybe that is why Matt Vitstham feels great about a spot which you would expect to be a point of struggle for USD this year. The Yotes had a scrimmage in the Dome on Sunday. Matt Zimmer wrote about it at Sioux Falls Live. The A topic of the Yotes this fall is, of course, the quarterback spot. A week ago, Matt discovered that Austin Majewski had vaulted into the front runner to be the starter. This is the freshman from Colorado, a two-time Gatorade Player of the Year in that state. But on Sunday, he struggled, and so did both of the other candidates, Jackson Proctor and Nevin Cremascoli, both seniors. So Matt Vitstam's latest remarks about the quarterback spot were this in Matt Zimmer's Sioux Falls Live article. First of all, before I read those, it doesn't seem like much has really changed. That Majewski has not quite been overtaken because both of the other guys have struggled. But Vitstham said, I can tell you this, the last 10 days have been really, really difficult on them. We've thrown the kitchen sink at them, the 4-minute offense, the 2-minute offense, the end of half, all of it. And plus they have a pretty salty defense as well at USD. And so Zimmer asked the new head coach, does that mean he's open to playing more than one quarterback on August 29th against Central Connecticut State, who's not a pushover like SDSU's first opponent, Stetson? And Vitstham said, I think there's a possibility of doing that, playing multiple quarterbacks to bring out their skill sets. What I want right now is to go in and watch tape. We made it very clear. Sunday's scrimmage was a big evaluation piece of the decision we're eventually going to have to make, and we feel good about our process that we're going to do that. So there you go. The quarterback situation at USD far from resolved, even though it looked like we had a front runner a week ago. And then we get to the Minnesota Vikings and their quarterback position. Kyler Murray was named starter last week. We thought that would be the case all along. Put in a guy that's a proven 7-year starter, bad teams, bad O-lines, bad organization, the Cardinals, put him in a much better spot in Minnesota, and he's going to do better than J.J. McCarthy, even if he doesn't head and shoulders win the fall camp battle. And those two guys had an evaluation opportunity on Saturday in New York against the Giants in the first preseason game. So what did we learn in real, quote-unquote, real work? Well, Kyler Murray was out there for just one series, completed 3 short passes. It ended up in a field goal. And according to Ben Lieber, this is nothing to be alarmed or even underwhelmed by if you're a Vikings fan. They weren't calling plays to evaluate Kyler Murray's play. They were calling plays to run the offense. Kevin O'Connell has shouted for anybody who would listen, they are going to run the ball more and better this year, and they made that a point with using fullbacks and tight ends, actually, on the first team offense on the first drive, and that was more of the focal point. And Murray drove him down the field, and they had seen enough of him because if you score on that first possession, typically, as Ben Lieber would explain Monday morning, that's a first preseason game sort of deal. If the quarterback isn't a disaster, he's going to only play for one series. They've seen enough. And then J.J. McCarthy came out, and he looked jittery. He completed a few passes. He threw a bunch of footballs into tight windows to passes that were broken up. He didn't look awesome. He didn't look awful. He wasn't very convincing. And he didn't put anything out there that says, well, come on, we have to reconsider this here. He's pushing Kyler Murray. The real question now, and this has become a national topic for those covering the Vikings nationally, Pro Football Talk wrote an article about this today, is J.J. McCarthy might be competing for the backup job with Carson Wentz, who went out there and actually statistically performed the best of the 3 Vikings quarterbacks. Now, this is a preseason game. Murray's going against the top offense, top defense. McCarthy's likely going against backups, and Wentz is going up presumably against third stringers. But the narrative is now turned into which might be a better option there, a narrative that you may have heard a lot earlier than this morning. In fact, last Tuesday with Matt Zimmer and I here on Happy Hour. If Kyler Murray gets hurt, who's to say that Carson Wentz isn't a better option than J.J. McCarthy? Or at least, or either way. Like, it's fine. That's a toss-up. They proved it last year. I mean,
right,
Carson was
but
okay,
if
JJ was
Kyler Murray
okay.
goes down, then I think you abandon any thought of really competing. And then why don't you go with JJ? And well, all right, let's find out what we got. We don't, we're not going to win anything. Go out there and sink or swim.
Yeah. Who's to say McCarthy's that much better than Wentz of an option? Remember last year, they both played a bunch. Record-wise, McCarthy 6-4, Wentz 2-3. But remember, JJ won 4 straight games at the end of the season against lousy teams and pretty bad defenses. The Commanders, the Cowboys, the Giants. The only playoff team in the bunch were a first-round exit in the Green Bay Packers, who, by the way, didn't play into their starters. Meanwhile, Carson Wentz was getting bludgeoned in the middle of the season because of a battered offensive line and had to throw footballs into the fire of the Steelers, the Eagles, the Rams, teams like that. And when it came out in the wash statistically, McCarthy, 10 games, completed 58% of his passes. That's really bad in the NFL and in today's modern game. And Carson Wentz was statistically average, completing 65%. McCarthy, 11 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Wentz, 6 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. They both had offensive lines that were bruised and bad. They didn't have much time to make plays. But statistically, comparatively, they were similar. And if you even go to passer rating, Wentz's was better at 86 to 72. We saw it for a full season. And sure, what happened between now and Sunday in New York matters. But Carson Wentz, who, by the way, has a decade-plus more experience than J.J. McCarthy in the NFL, is just as viable, and I use that term loosely, of an option if Kyler Murray gets hurt and the Vikings need backup services. Wentz, at this point in his career, has proven he's not a starter, but he is a capable backup, and McCarthy has proven little more than that. And, of course, trade rumors are already floating around about McCarthy. You're not going to get much for him. But San Diego, I should put that money in the swear jar. The LA Chargers seem would like the most logical option everybody's drawn lines to because of his former college coach, Jim Harbaugh, who was there when JJ thrived in the Big Ten. But if McCarthy was shown the road or even was taken down a notch to number 3, no objection here. I don't think it makes a big difference. On with the show.